Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teams from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. And away we go. Here we are with the Principles of Performance podcast. I am your host, Eric DeGatti, along with my friend and co-host, Mike Perry, who's back with me this week. Mike, welcome back.
Yes, a well-deserved vacation. The first one that we've ever taken as a gym owner in actually ever. 13 years February vacation. So the first one as a family. So I'm a little ashamed to say that, but at the same time, it's not easy to grow a business. You can grow a bad business, I guess, but if you want to grow a successful business, you have to put a little bit of time in. So, but it's good to be back, man. It's good to be back.
Well, good to have you back. And speaking of growing successful businesses, there's some shows when we put together the research and I do the notes and everything for it. I know we're going to have a good one, and this one feels like a good one. So we have, speaking of successful businesses, we're lucky enough to have Andy McCloy. He's one of the world's leading strength coaches. He's worked with hundreds of athletes ranging from middle to high school to professional levels, NFL, MLB, NBA. But Andy had to overcome a tough and kind of colorful past to get where he is now. And he's going to share a little bit about that with us. And he fought through his adversity to build one of the most successful sports performance businesses in the South. It's called Body Creations Inc. or BCI. And it's down in Alabama. And we are super excited to have him with us. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And really quick, Mike, I want to acknowledge the fact that I, too, spent about 13 years before I took a vacation, ironically. But that was a big awakening for me, too, as it probably was for you, right? We got to get to that point where we can take the time off.
Yeah, and I probably could have taken it off earlier in my mind. But as you know, when you build something that is literally built with blood, sweat, and tears, it's a little bit hard to step away, and while you're physically away, the mentally away part is a little bit staggered in its ability to make separation. But it was a step in the right direction, and it's about balance, right? It's all about balance. And I tell people, if you think it's about balance, it's not a 50-50 balance. It's the first 13 years, you're going to be doing 80% of the work and 20% rest. And eventually, hopefully, we get to do the swap down the road, right? We get to enjoy it a little bit more. But, 13 years, right, Andy? That's all it takes to be an overnight success.
That's exactly right. If you just keep your head down long enough and put in enough time, you will, too, become an overnight success.
Absolutely. All right. So your Instagram, I run the best gym in Alabama. How do you say that with confidence? And what did it take to make it the best?
Well, I mean, I think part of that is just my certainty and confidence of the work that we do to run a really good business. But I would also say that just being in this industry for 23 years now, I've had an opportunity to look at a lot of businesses in our space. And quite frankly, a lot of them are not ran that well. I have my bias towards how I think a business should be run in this space. And I think we do things the right way. But high quality training, highly profitable business that's actually making an impact. And we're real strength and conditioning coaches. I think a lot of businesses in our space are ran by fitness hobbyists. And I don't mean that to sound insulting. It just is what it is. There's a lot of people now in the world that are engineers or accountants who then kind of go start their own gym, and it's not really their world. So sometimes they don't know what they don't know, and they build a business that I'm probably a little more judgmental of than maybe I should be.
All right. So we've kind of hinted at this a little bit, but building a successful business, it isn't easy, especially when you have to overcome some of the challenges that you mentioned that you've had in your life. Talk a little bit about your past, and it kind of helped shape not only who you are today, but also how you go about your business.
How far do you want me to go back?
Give
I
us
can
the good
start.
stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff. Well, so I grew up in the Washington D.C. area. I live in Alabama now. I grew up in an area that was almost in between DC and Baltimore. So you had all the trappings of what comes with that. I didn't grow up in the nicer areas per se. When I was a young kid, I was already in a lot of trouble. I was selling drugs, fighting, and involved in a lot of things that, quite frankly, I don't talk as much about today. I found this kind of weird moment a couple years ago where I felt like I was gaining significance talking about things that, quite frankly, I'm a little embarrassed about. But I sold drugs. I got in a lot of trouble. And at 16 years old, I had my first kid. That was kind of the first thing that smacked me in the face that this type of lifestyle wasn't going to get me very far. I would love to say that I changed immediately, but I did not. I continued to act like a fool. But about 18 years old, I was at a local Gold's Gym, and I met a guy who had a very similar background to me. He came walking in this gym with Alvin Harper. I don't know if you guys remember that name, but he played for the Redskins. He played for the Cowboys. And I saw him, and I could just tell he was somebody. He was walking with Alvin, and something in me said, just go talk to this guy. And I ended up walking out in the parking lot, introducing myself. His name was Eric Williams. I said, hey, man, I'm Andy. I said, I've always wanted to be a trainer. Who are you? And he just started sharing with me that he was there to consider a contract at that old Gold's Gym. And this Gold's Gym that we were at was also owned by John and Kurt Galliani. They were the guys that owned all of corporate licensing for Gold's. And he continued to share with me that he had a license at all these gyms around the Washington, D.C. area. I started telling him my story. I said, hey, man, I live down in the projects in, Indian Head, Maryland. I was 18. I got a 2-year-old kid, and I really don't know what to do with my life. But this training thing has always been a part of what I wanted to do. Now, honestly, that was a bold-faced lie. I don't know where that actually came from. It's just something about me meeting this guy. He was standing next to a Range Rover, which was his vehicle. And I saw a guy that was successful. And quite frankly, at that stage of my life, that's all I really wanted. I wanted to not be a loser. I wanted to not be a screw up. And he ended up inviting me up to his gym, which was in Roslyn, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. I went up there and met him, and he kind of took me under his wing. He gave me an opportunity to be a personal trainer and eventually made me the director of nutritional services for this company. Again, I would love to say that was enough to kind of pull me out of knucklehead behavior, but it's really all I knew. And knowing what I know now about our need for significance, I gained a lot of it by being involved in things that were culturally popular in my area, but were just, signs of me becoming a degenerate, if I'm honest. And he really did empower me. But then a couple things happened in my world. I had a friend of mine murdered. I had a couple other friends that went to prison, and the writing was just on the wall. One part of this story I didn't share is that my parents moved to Alabama right around the time I was 17-ish, 18 years old. So they had been down here. And I had no interest in moving to Alabama. I thought it was just dirt roads and racism, to be honest. Like growing up where I grew up, that was my perception of Alabama, as it probably is for some of the listeners here today. But my parents had shared enough with me that I knew one thing. It was a more wholesome place. There wasn't as much crime. There was really good schools. And I wanted to be a good father, man. Like I really wanted to. I was just a kid myself. I didn't know what I didn't know about life. And so that led to us kind of overnight moving here to Alabama, and which was kind of the catalyst to help me really get my life together as a whole. I was in a new place, and I had an opportunity to redefine myself. In my hometown, I was known for being kind of a lunatic and involved in a lot of things that I was involved in. And there wasn't a part of me that felt like I needed to shed that, but I knew that there was an opportunity to become a different version of myself. And Alabama's provided me the opportunity to do that. And I'm very proud of how far I've come as a person. And I don't mean to dodge anything that you may be wanting me to talk about. So if there's any specifics you want me to dive deeper into, I'm happy to. I've just kind of reached a point in my life where talking about some of that stuff doesn't make me feel as good as it used to.
Totally get it. And more to get people, because we get a lot of, especially young trainers and coaches out there, and getting them to understand, like, there's a lot of routes that you can get to success in this industry. And it's not always the traditional, I got out of high school, I went and got my exercise science degree, I went and got a job, and then I worked up through the rungs, because there's very few people that I've actually met that I've seen in all levels of this that actually did it that way. They usually had something that they had to overcome, and everybody has their own path, and that's why I asked you to share some of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my path has been very different. I mean, in my experience, most of the people that I started to meet, they did have that very traditional path. They went to college, they got the degree, they had the internship, and I had none of that. But I that was kind of a strength in some regards. Like in hindsight, I had this deep level of insecurity that nobody can ever ask me what school did I go to. Like that was my biggest fear because I had no degree. I went to three different high schools. I had troubles at all of them, and I just did not want anybody to ever say, well, "What's your degree in?" Or "What school did you go to?" So that insecurity and this indirect path drove me to be very compulsive and obsessive about my education. That's really what's kind of powered me throughout my entire career.
It's funny you say that because it's very similar. We had Luka Hocevar on the show and shares a similar story and how he's just become completely, enraptured by education and learning and all that sort of stuff. And also puts in perspective, like a lot of our industry and a lot of like the talk is tough guy talk. It's like, hey, we're gonna prepare for war, we're gonna do all this stuff. And it's like, I always tell the coaches that I work with, it's like, no, we're not. We're getting kids here getting ready to play football on Friday night. Like they're gonna go into their mom's, car with a nice sandwich waiting for them and a cold Gatorade at the end of this workout. We're not training Navy SEALs here. So let's get over that type of kind of tough talk that I try to eliminate, especially in the young performance setting and in high school where we get a little bit too crazy with that type of stuff, like of mental toughness. And it's like mental toughness isn't doing gassers, dude. Mental toughness is real life type stuff.
No, man, I totally agree. And Luke, I don't know if you know or not. I mean, Luke is one of my best friends in the world. And when I just started my adult program again, which was probably, I mean, maybe 10 years ago now, probably longer than that. I found out who Luca was from a buddy of mine. They said he ran a really good gym, and I flew out there really just with the intention to watch a good adult fitness program. That was it. I just wanted to be a fly on the wall. But after going to dinner, we had a lot of shared experiences and things that we got involved in. And then both of us had this compulsion for reading. We just kind of go back and forth about books that we've read and things that we've done. And there are a lot of people out there like that. Not everybody in this industry that's doing well had that classical path. And being able to find your tribe or find your people is really important for career development. At least it has been in my experience.
Love it. Love it. So we're going to change gears a little bit. So, I know you've worked with young athletes and, I think one of the things that people don't realize when you work with young athletes is the most important thing is being able to relate to them first and foremost, right? Like if they don't trust you, if they don't know that you are there for their positive benefit, if you will, it's not gonna end up the way you like. Do you feel like your experience and your story enables you to relate to younger athletes just differently than other coaches?
I absolutely do. And even maybe more so with professional athletes. I found that it was really valuable for me to have some of the experiences I've had in my life because a lot of the guys I was dealing with had grown up in similar situations and around similar things. So it created this bonding capital. And in regards to youth performance, one of the things that I recognized really early on is that a lot of kids in this area, which is it's a really nice area. We have the highest income per capita in the whole Southeast, and we're like a microcosm of Washington, D.C. And we've got a lot of kids here that live in the suburbs and nice areas that were leaning into things that, I had been involved in. And I could connect to that. I understood why they felt pulled into that. They wanted to be a part of something. They wanted to be socially significant. And being involved in certain things has a tendency to do that, so it allowed me to talk to these kids like, hey man, like listen, I know you're involved in these things, but this isn't the move, man. And being able to use training as a vehicle to guide them in another direction has been really powerful.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we get hired for our expertise in science of health and performance, but there's something that the great coaches do that kind of transcends that and it elevates it beyond just sets and reps. But we have to have that balance of the mental coaching and then the physical preparation. And it also has to be genuine. Like it can't be the rah-rah stuff. Like I see like kids see right through the guy with the sleeves cut off, jumping up and down, pumping his fists on the sideline. Like that gets old real fast. Like Talk about being genuine and balancing the mental stuff with the physical preparation.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if it's getting old for the kids. I think the kids and athletes, for some reason, really attached to that style of coaching. I think it's like the low hanging fruit, though, of coaching. It's the easiest thing to do, and it often overshadows what people don't know about the training process. We had a situation actually in our town. I call it a situation, but there was a guy who didn't have a ton of experience, but he was very good with connecting with athletes. He was very good at rah rah. He probably had a YouTube premium membership because he had a bunch of drills he knew how to put people through, but there was really no coaching. He really didn't know what he didn't know, which was obvious to me and other people in our market that are educated, but it really wasn't obvious to kids. And I had a couple parents reach out to me and kids asking me what I thought, and we were able to have an honest conversation without slamming and bashing this guy. But that's a big red flag for me. When somebody is very rah rah, when it's all about the energy, when it's all about the hype, it's often overshadowing what they don't know. And if you have a little bit of both, I'd suggest that you can be really successful. But the priority should be on your coaching pedigree as opposed to just running around yelling and screaming and making noise.
All right. So I want to get to the question here, and Mike, we'll come back to you in a second. That kind of sparked me trying to put this specific podcast together, because it was something that you posted a few months back that I jumped in on the conversation on, and you kind of just put out there like kids are changing, and I don't know if it's for the better. Now every generation says that the generation before them is weaker and softer and so forth. And I actually just saw an interesting interview with a woman who just wrote a book about this. And to some extent, it's true. You look back at like our grandparents' generations who fought in wars and, went through depressions and so forth is far more challenging than what we had to experience. But there's definitely something to what you said, because it definitely, kind of lit a spark with a lot of people. What do you think it is, and why that's so?
I think what I'm specifically seeing is kids used to derive their significance through the work. Now I believe kids get a lot of their significance from showing people that they're doing things that look like work. So instead of kids wanting to come to a training center and train hard where there's no tripods, cameras, and other stuff going on, where the PR is the juice, right? That's what they're going for. Now it's very easy for a kid to go to a really nice gym that has really nice lighting. Shoot, they might even have tripods set up. They can train with their boys. They can do the exercises that they want, and they can kind of shape the perception that people have of them by becoming almost like mini influencers. So that's one of the things that I think is driving it, is this social media world that we live in now. Kids don't want to work in quiet. They want to work with the tripod on, and they want to tell you all about it.
Oh, hashtag grinding, right?
Yeah, grind it, right? While they haven't broken a sweat because they took 18 minutes to set up their tripod. But I also think in regards to now the world of skill development has significantly increased. So I jokingly say that football players are now becoming basketball players, and baseball players are becoming football players. And what I mean by that is football players used to want to be in the gym really getting after it. Okay, I live in the South. I live in Alabama. This is football country. And I've watched a big shift towards kids wanting to just do position-specific work and really kind of avoid the weight room, okay? Which I jokingly say is how basketball players are, right? That's basketball guys have never wanted to live in the weight room. I've trained plenty of them that do, but as a whole, there's a lot of them do not. And I used to joke about baseball players. I used to joke on baseball players all the time. Well, the joke's kind of on me now, because baseball players have become the football players. They're the ones that are really in there banging. They're the ones that really want to get after it. And even my whole staff, because I'm kind of operationally irrelevant at my gym now. I'm kind of out of the coaching, and I just guide the vision of the business. But my two main coaches now, they are baseball guys. So my whole gym has went from like football and basketball dudes to a lot of baseball dudes. And that's not just because of the hires that I've made. I see this shift in the culture where people are prioritizing more of the skill work as opposed to the GPP work associated with their sport.
Now, two things that I've noticed, and I don't know if you picked this up, and Mike, you can jump in on this, is because I still consult with some high schools. And one of not only are we, and this is especially post-COVID, is that we have a much less physically resilient organism coming to us. That's the eighth grade freshman kid, is that they They haven't climbed on monkey bars. They haven't ridden bikes. They haven't played tag. They haven't done anything that wasn't basically planned for them. Right. And so there's very little physical resilience. And then there's also very limited mental resilience, and or I shouldn't say that. Well, there is that, but there's also a limited coaching ability because there's just not the attention span. And this is really post COVID, where these poor kids got stuck in front of, laptop screens for 2 years. And now literally I'll watch a coach say, okay, a wrestling coach will say, all right, we're going to do this and then this. Okay. And then, all right, you ready? Everybody understand? Yes. They'll break off into their groups and they'll get in their group, go, what are we doing, coach?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it makes it really challenging to coach.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of the same things in that regard. Kids' attention span is dwindling, and I think the lack of physical resilience, it goes back to like really when early sports specialization started becoming kind of the predominant way that people approach sports, right? And we call it the three-headed monster. You've got early sports specialization, you've got no real physical education in school, and then kids now don't really go outside and play. All of the autonomy that used to be involved and the creativity that came from playing sports in your backyard with your friends, that's a very rare thing. So, as adults have gotten involved in everything, and kind of the pay to play model of travel sports and AAU became the most dominant way of approaching sport development, we've seen kids go backwards. And what's a little scary is, despite the reality of that, we all know it, all the professionals know it, almost every parent I talk to says they agree, but yet nobody's changing it. And I don't think we are ever going to change it. And that's why we started building all of our programs around long-term athletic development, and almost starting a propaganda campaign for the people on our email list and inside our building and around the city about the importance of having a long game approach and what long-term athletic development is, why they need to train a specific way in certain maturation windows. And when we started our development and fundamentals program, which starts for like 7 to 11-year-olds, that was kind of us planting our flag and saying, hey, look, we're going to do whatever we can to change this. And I'll just say this from a business perspective, that actually has worked against us to a degree, because, parents really want their 8-year-old to do what 13-year-olds are doing. Now, we all know that that's the wrong approach. But parents, like all of us, right, we're emotional, and we can develop this cognitive dissonance, right, that makes us hard for us to see the truth of things. And I see that a lot in youth sports. You have a lot of people that want it to be done the right way, and they recognize the consequences of it not being done that way, yet they don't know how to create a situation or an environment where that becomes the new way again.
You know what? I think it's a situation where people just, I think there's a lot of people that they think they're educated, but they're not, and then vice versa, right? So I joke with a lot of young coaches, and I'm like, look, if you want to be good at coaching, you got to be a really nice person. I always love what Boyle says: be a certified nice person, and you got to know your stuff, right? There's a lot of really good people out there, really nice people, really friendly, great, amazing, awesome people that suck at what they do.
Yes.
And that's just the reality of it. And that's okay. And vice versa. There are some people that are like the best surgeons in the world. They don't talk to people generally, right? The best software engineers, they don't talk to people because they don't have the ability. They're more technicians. And I think what we need to do is teach parents and coaches, hey, look, if you are not as educated, that's okay. But you need to be their biggest fan. You need to be a positive influence. And that's how you can make a really positive impact that will make a lasting change and isn't going to screw them up because you don't know what the hell you're doing. And I think that's a sweet spot.
No, I agree. I think it's on us. It's on the people that own training centers to be that voice. And it's one of the main reasons we still do like real face-to-face sales meetings with people that come in. We used to call them intake interviews. Now we call them game plan sessions. Intake interview, I admit, sounded a little aggressive, but that was intentional to kind of create the frame of, hey, look, you're coming here to be interviewed, whether you're a good fit for us too, right? You're not just interviewing us to see if we're a good fit for you. I want to make sure you're a good fit for us. And part of that is asking hard questions to parents and athletes about what their expectations are around the training process. And I've found by doing these intake interviews and game plan sessions, we're able to set the appropriate expectation, frame things up right for the parent and the athlete That way they don't fall victim to a lot of the microwave fitness ideology that's out there where you get fast, immediate results in 90 days. It's also one of the reasons why, from a business model standpoint, we sell top down. So with all of my integrity, we believe every athlete should train with us 12 months. We don't sell sessions and we don't do seasonal marketing. We try to enroll you in either an off-season, in-season split, or if you come in-season, off-season split. We have flexibility in our schedule. We have flexibility in the days of the week. They can make manipulations to that on the fly. We've got systems around that. Because if your kid's in our program year round, I got 12 months. I have so many other touch points where I can educate you and I can educate that kid. I mean, we've had kids that start with us at 8 years old that, are now in the NFL. Kids that start with us. I mean, right now we've got a kid at Texas A&M. There's a kid at USC. They both started with us 8, 9 years old. And I think it's important. The longer you have these people in your building, you have the opportunity to start to reshape their views and perspective. And if you can do that with like one kid in one family, dad will have those conversations with his, friends and the people close to him. And once they start to hear it, they can't unhear it. They have to at least now consider there's a better way to do these things.
I appreciate that you're saying that. And as I have a question lined up in a little bit where the parents come into play, but I want to talk about our responsibility of not being enablers to this whole situation, right? Because we get on these types of situations or on social media, we complain about, oh, the kids are soft, the kids are this, but then we can't enable that by providing shitty service where we know it's easy money because the parents don't know any better. That if we just set up a speed ladder and just do a 60-minute class and just go through the motions, we can still make money doing that because the parent doesn't know any better, the kid doesn't know any better, but we need to know better. And so it's on us to not be enablers to this situation, that to do the things that you're doing and to kind of gently poke the finger in the chest and say, look, you have the capacity to do more and be better. And I'm going to find that in you, but it's going to be challenging. It's going to be difficult. And mom and dad, you have to trust that I know what I'm doing to do that.
No, absolutely. And again, I think this comes back to how you set the frame when an athlete enters your ecosystem. If you have to have these conversations, like you have to know that parents are running into all types of nonsensical stuff about how the training process should go. So it's on us to do that. And if you don't, like if you're scared to have those hard conversations with parents or with athletes, that's going to work against you at some point. They will lose trust in you because you're not giving them the other side of the coin. And I'll say this too. I think, we talk about the technology and everything affecting the kids and their ability to focus and pay attention. I'll tell you, as somebody who is looking, we're looking at another location right now. And I'm in the process of interviewing coaches. The whole technology thing is affecting young 20-year-olds as well. What I'm finding is I don't trust a lot of young 20-year-olds to lead teenagers or to lead preteens because their perspective on the training process is so convoluted and distorted because of social media, which I strongly believe. Some people push back against this, but I strongly believe that's how most trainers are educating themselves now. Most trainers are just going to Instagram and repeating exercises in words they heard other people say. And the problem with that is most of them don't know who's who or what's what. If you're like, what I do is knowing this, and I have a younger staff, I leverage this with my team. So I'll send them stuff from Altus. I'll send them stuff from, my trusted professionals. That way I'm helping guide them at least in the right direction, because there's so many persuasive characters out here now that a young coach will find somebody that aligns with how they want things to be. And then they'll build their business around that, as opposed to having a classical education where they can discern the difference between nonsense and really quality training material.
It's scary, but I've seen it firsthand. I've seen literally trainers with YouTube on as they're training somebody. Like you're not even trying to hide it. Like I'm just and at some point the end user is going to say, well, I got YouTube too. What am I paying you $75 for this for?
Yeah, it's the coaching, man. Like we saw this during COVID times, right? Like the online space went through the roof. I mean, it just blew up. Everybody's an online coach. Well, once everybody could go outside again, what happened to that bubble? It started to go back down because people want to be coached in person. And a lot of people online are just regurgitating things that they've seen other people do. It's like, oh, this got a lot of likes. This got a lot of plays. I'm going to use that in my marketing. And if it's used in marketing, it's probably also used in their programming, sadly, right? Like it's the craziest stuff they market because of the polarity. But I have not seen a lot of people in that space have the sense to not program in a very similar way.
Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show.
You mentioned something earlier, and I want to go back to the conversation about kids here, and you know, you mentioned sort of planting your flag. So I think this is what happens when you're a young coach, and this is what happened to me. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think at a certain point when you're a young coach and maybe you're a young business owner, you're just excited that people want to pay you, right? And then I think a lot of the times it's very easy to get influenced by parents and coaches because they want it done a certain way, and they're the feeder system, right? So a lot of the times what I felt early on is I wasn't confident enough in my ability to be like, no, this is what the kids really need. I was actually doing more of what the parents wanted. And I think over the years of just trial and error, and obviously just being more consistent with my coaching and training, you know, once you get to that point where you can really plant that flag, right, and really stand in what you believe in, it's really cool to see how the business evolves just slowly over time. And it's not because necessarily anything changed, it's that you're steadfast with your beliefs and your approach. And if you keep on just holding to that over time, people are going to be like, look, this individual has been saying the same stuff. When I say same stuff, not exact same stuff, but they have been following a similar set of principles for years and years and years, and it's still working. I think about the guys I grew up with, you know, Eric Cressy and you know, all those guys, right? Those guys, their stuff was good 10 years ago and it's good now. And because it's built off of principles, it's built off of wisdom and information gained through the trenches, not Google searches and just it's so easy to get information on social media that we can, it's literally like it's like a fast food restaurant. It's like, what exercise, hip mobility, boom, you got 1,000 things that come up. Literally, it's done for you. And I think it's gonna, in a way, I do think the online world, and especially as AI gets into program design, and a lot of people are using that. I mean, I saw someone's like, oh, I use AI for program design. I'm like, cool, I'm glad you can make money, but you probably don't know a damn thing about coaching. And AI, yes, can help you do the informational math, but if you don't know how to have a conversation with someone or sit someone down and be like, look, man, this is what you truly need to change, AI will never replace the authentic relationships.
No, I totally agree. And kudos to you for being able to own, you know, the journey and path that you've been on, because I know how hard that was when I first started out. I started doing speed camps and clinics, and I would have these coaches suggest that we do things, and I wanted to appease them, but I also wanted to stay true to my principles. And I got lucky that very early on, at one of the schools I had contracts with, I had a head coach named Eric Koyu, and he put all the trust in me. And the day that I knew that we were going to work well together is when I walked into his office and I talked about, he wanted to do 16 110s for their conditioning test. And I was able to walk in there and talk to him about the energetics, energy system development, what made sense, what time motion research would dictate the average play is. And we had this really good talk about how to develop a better system. And he allowed me to do that and gave full trust. And honestly, if he had not given me that so early on in my career, I don't know if I would have developed that steadfastness in my own beliefs and principles. Him allowing me to do that allowed me to create evidence that my way worked, right? And when you're young, you don't have a lot of evidence that your way works. So you just kind of bolt on to certain things, and then through time, you start to figure it out. Because the other really complex thing, and I've talked about this a lot, is like, listen, you can read Super Training, Science and Practice, you can read all the classic books, right? None of it prepares you to walk into a high school environment. Those are not Olympic athletes. And it's even less helpful in the private market I've read every translated Russian manual that Elite FTS sold. Okay. Not one of them has helped me ever in the private market. It's given me
It's so true.
perspective and knowledge that I do think is valuable, right? I'm a great conversationalist when it comes to those topics, right? Like I've invested a lot of time in that, but it hasn't helped me a bit in my business, you know? So I think it's really important to figure out what you believe, but then also, is what I believe in congruent with the environment that I'm coaching in, right? I think that's another part that people really don't take into account. And I said this on a podcast I was on earlier this week or last week. It's that, you know, kids don't know what they don't know. Coaches don't know what they don't know. So unless you run into the right people and the right mentors, you're going to have a really hard time building a business in this space. And the thing that really works against good strength coaches is that they're good strength coaches. You know, when you're a really good strength coach and you've been in a certain environment, it's very hard to take that and understand how it applies to the private market. When you've got 10 kids in a group, maybe one of them has a real strength coach at a high school. They're all from different schools, and their coaches range from a defensive line coach who's running Alabama's program to somebody who's doing Feed the Cats to somebody that's doing CrossFit. I mean, I've seen it all. There is no book written on how to do that. And if your perspective as a strength coach is traditional, that's going to be very hard to sort through. So being a good strength coach, it sometimes works against you when it comes to building a business in the private market.
I love that. Absolutely love that. All right. So, let's talk about leadership and let's talk about the ability to push kids. You mentioned it earlier, and I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. You had mentioned you had someone early on that sort of gave you sort of the keys or the opportunity, right? A big part of that is confidence, right? So if you know that someone has your back and they're willing to give you the keys, right? That instills a certain amount of confidence. And we know that kids thrive off of confidence, right? There's that fine line between making sure that we're pushing them in the right direction, we're nudging them, but at the same time, we can't beat them down because, I mean, we both know what the research says when you just scream and yell at kids and tell them that they
Yep.
suck. Nothing good comes out of that. So what do you feel like is that magic sweet spot of tough love, of building them on having their back? Are there any insights that you could give us that as for any coach listening that would allow them to have a greater impact on the athletes that they're working with?
Yeah, let me see if I can unpack that a bit. So when I was younger, I was very heavy-handed with harsh comments. I was very sarcastic, and it was not an attempt to shame or bully kids. It's just the only way I knew how to connect. JL Holdsworth, who you guys probably know, another good friend of mine, trained at Westside for years, owns two really good gyms in Columbus. He said to me one time, I had him do an RPR event at my gym, and he said, sarcasm is really thinly veiled negativity. And in certain communities, sarcasm works. Okay. Like, especially high performance teams, it seems to work. But when you are dealing with kids, it doesn't always work. And I think a lot of the resistance I found with kids early on was because they didn't know how to take that. They felt kind of like I was picking on them or messing with them. And I, very biased in my coaching style, was like, well, that kid's just soft, right? So in my mind, I started to create that divide too. What I tell people is I had a very pivotal moment in my coaching career where Jordan Matthews, who is currently with the Panthers, he's been 11 years in the NFL. I started training Jordan when he was about 11 years old. I was brutal to that kid from 11 to 14. His freshman year of high school, he had a really good game. And after the game, I dapped him up and I hugged him. And he said, I love you, man. And it's like it shook my entire soul. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. He actually cares about me? And sometime around, there's a book, and I'm forgetting the guy's name, but it's a coaching book. And I read that quote, nobody cares what you know until they know how much you care. And the combination of those two things changed me as a coach for forever. It doesn't mean that I'm not hard and direct with kids that need it, but I start with heart and from a place of empathy. And if I can connect with that kid there, I'm going to have a much easier time influencing his behavior. And this is something that we talk about as a staff. I mean, literally just a week ago, we had an entire in staff on what is coaching, what is the coaching mindset, how does a coach, the hard skills, how do they apply them, but the soft skills of connection and communication, what are good strategies to do that? Every coach in my gym knows how to have a crucial conversation. And I assume you got, I don't know if you're familiar with that book. There's a great book called Crucial Conversations. And there's
I
another one called,
am
you
I
like
am in
it?
the middle of that book and I can't even get through the first, like I've gone through it, but I
Yep.
literally have to listen to like and read each chapter. I do both because like every time
Yep.
I go through one, I literally have to listen to it again and again because I mine so much quality information out of that one book. Like that book uh, has literally changed my ability to communicate.
Listen, man, I've used that to get first class tickets on airplanes. I've used it to get out of horrendous disagreements with my wife and my children. And I've used it with kids a ton. That framework really, really works. And what we just coach it very simple. It's, start with heart, state the facts, come to a shared agreement. So if we've got a kid that's underperforming, it's like, hey, man, like I recognize something's a little off today. You good? After you get some feedback, it's like, okay, well, look, here's the deal, man. Like, you know why you're here. Like, if you need a rest day, we need to talk about that. But listen, if you really want to get better today, there's a certain effort that's required. Can I get an agreement that you're going to do your best today? I'm aware you're not feeling good or something's up, but can you give me that today? And we make an agreement and we move on. And you can use that framework in every hard conversation you ever want to have with an athlete, an employee, um, a parent. If a parent comes to you and wants little Johnny to go from our middle school program to the high school program at 13 years old, that's just not something we're willing to do, even if Johnny's a little more advanced than the other kids. So we might
Yeah.
have to have a crucial conversation around that and giving people a framework to do that. And for myself, it's been incredibly beneficial because, like I said, I was a little sarcastic and direct the first decade of my coaching career, and that didn't always land well. So that's helped me a ton.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's an element to that too, where, that because of the easy cop out, and I think it's a lazy cop out, is to say, oh, these kids are soft, right?
Yep.
Is that change, whatever you're talking about in the last 20 years, since the iPhones and social media, since all that stuff, is that yes, that culturally has changed, but our genome, our DNA has not changed. And that has been built for thousands and thousands of years to embrace challenge and to look for that type of situation and want to overcome that and want to be involved in those types of things. You just have to artfully, like you just said, get to that. And it's not by yelling and screaming. It's by pulling kid to the side, say, is everything cool? All right, well then is that the best you have? Like really? That's you're gonna tell me that's the best you can do? Because I know you're better than that. And as soon as they know that comes from a place of love, like you said, it's like, okay, no, coach, I want to do better and I want to do better for you. And it's no, it's not for me, it's for you. And once they get that, that's the magic of really great coaching.
No, I don't disagree. I mean, it is. And I think that as coaches, we have an obligation to do that. And I think when you're younger, you're so caught up in the X's and O's. And if you work at a facility like ours, our system is very regimented. You're going to spend a certain amount of time here, a certain amount of time here. That way we can get everything in. So if you aren't skilled in that, a lot of coaches will bypass an opportunity to help a kid get realigned because he's just running the session. And if you don't come back at the end of that session and then talk to that kid, you've missed an opportunity to shape his behavior for the next one. So not only do you have to have a framework of how to have these hard conversations, there has to be a willingness or almost an obligation that if you see a kid underperforming, to either pull them aside, or if you don't want to disrupt your session, like we try not to do that anymore. I used to, I'd shut a whole session down, everybody. But now it's not a very scalable strategy. But so now what we'll do is we'll just pull a kid aside, like, hey man, I want to chat with you after the workout. That cool? And then that way after the workout, we've got an opportunity to debrief on it.
Now, we talk about us having hard conversations. You know who doesn't really have those hard conversations enough anymore? Is parents. And being able to have that conversation to where I even when I've coached with my kids and I was the skill coach, they would say I would have parents come up to me, hey, can you talk to G about his homework? Or can you talk to him about getting, not misbehaving in class? Because he'll listen to you. He doesn't listen to me. And that's the first problem right there. Number one, I'm his baseball coach. I'm not his therapist or his parent. But you actually have on your website a guide to parents' guide to helping your children reach their full potential. Let's talk a little bit about where parents, responsibility and role comes in this whole developmental process.
Well, it starts at home, and that's cliche. And I do think it's cliche for a reason as well. I think a lot of parents want to outsource some of the harder aspects of parenting. And I think some of the themes we've talked about today with kids being distracted and coaches being distracted, mom and dad is really distracted too. And I don't listen, I've got a 27-year-old daughter and I got a 9-year-old daughter. So I've been through this parenting thing. I got full custody of my 13-year-old daughter or my 27-year-old daughter when she was 13. Man, it is a challenge to talk to a 13-year-old girl. It is a challenge to talk to a 13-year-old boy. They're not meeting the expectations that you've set in your home. But it's a lot easier if the values, standards, and expectations are set at like 4, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're doing your job, they're going to be open to listening to you at 13. And I think a lot of parents are well-intentioned. And I by no means have all this figured out. Okay. A lot of what I'm sharing comes from me reflecting on my own mistakes and failures in this area. But if parents could, first of all, get very clear on their own values, the values of their family, and start to integrate that in at a young age, you would have a kid at 13 years old that you don't have to use his baseball coach or hitting instructor or whoever to talk him into doing homework. There's just a standard that's been set. The other part to this is I think a lot of parents are hypocrites. I think human beings as a whole struggle with this. We give people advice that we don't take ourselves. And I've had parents in my office. So when you enroll in our program, after 2 weeks in our program, you actually do get a meeting with me where we talk about nutrition, recovery, and mindset. Okay. In that meeting, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, if a parent speaks up about their child's nutrition, they're very judgmental of it. And I've had dads say, man, he just got to lose weight or he's just got to gain weight. He does this, this, and this. And I will kindly say, hey, Dad, let me ask you a question. How do you guys do that in your home? What does that look like in your house? And a lot of times the parents are not teaching their kid how to do this. They're modeling eating Captain Crunch for breakfast, or they're modeling running out of the house and drinking a sugar latte. So why would we be surprised that our child wants to do the same thing? How many times do you think a lot of athletes have watched their parents start and stop the gym? And then they get upset when little Johnny doesn't want to go to a workout. So, but what if we were modeling the opposite behaviors? And listen, I'm just going to be honest. I'm no perfect parent in any way, shape, or form. But there are a couple of things that my daughter sees. I prioritize sleep. I train every day. I lead with my heart, empathy, and love. Those are things that if she can bolt onto that in her own life later on, I would suggest are going to have value, for her. She doesn't see me going, I'm going to start a workout again and then stopping. She doesn't see me say, hey, I really want to learn how to do this, and then me not pick up a book and read it. She sees me do this stuff consistently. I think as parents, we have to be aware of that. You can't outsource parenting. You've got to set the tone. And if your kids are a little bit older right now, it doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to go back and still do that. You do. But it has to be from a place of humility where it's like, I tell my older daughter all the time, I'm like, baby, I wish I was who I am now when you were younger. I wish I could have given you what I'm able to give my youngest daughter, Kagan. And I don't mean from like a material standpoint. I mean from guidance in life and how to approach difficult situations, how to control your emotions. These are things I wasn't taught. I had to learn how to do this as I got older, usually after falling on my face. So, if you have a kid, he's 14, 15 years old and they're not listening to you, man, there's still an opportunity. You don't got to always go to the baseball coach for help. You might need to just sit them down and be like, hey, listen, I love you. I recognize there's some things going on, and I recognize that I haven't done a great job of helping you figure this out, but I really want to. So how can we work together to do that? Didn't mean to turn this into a parenting podcast.
No, because but it all boils down to communication, right? It all boils down to the ability to be honest and to just own your shit, right? That's really what it's about at the end of the day. But you had mentioned something, and as you were telling the story, you were saying you were talking to your daughter, and you're saying you wish you could have given your older daughter sort of what you gave your younger daughter. And I think at the end of the day, one thing we don't do as people is we don't embrace change. And like when people say, "Oh, you've changed," a lot of the time there's a negative connotation to that. Like if I said to someone, "Hey, you've changed," they're not usually like, "Woohoo!" Like, yeah, I have. They're usually, when you hear that, it's usually negative. But like I look at it and I'm like, well, thank God I have, right? Like you know what I'm saying? Like I think a lot of the times I'm like, I'd like to think that I'm a little bit better coach than I was a year ago. I'd like to think that I know a little bit more about communicating than I did a year ago. So like change is not a bad thing, even though people, when they say it, you've changed, it comes across sometimes as a little passive aggressive, and it comes across sometimes as a bad thing, but change is inevitable. And if you look at change as an opportunity to become a better version of yourself, that is when change is exciting. It's not a scary and a negative thing.
No, I agree. It's funny. I have a lot of kids now who come back. I mean, it's nuts, right? So I've got in my gym right now, I probably have 5 kids that are over 30 years old that I trained when they were like 11 and 12. One of them just retired from the SEAL teams. He just did 8 years in the SEAL teams, and he's my workout partner every day. And I joke all the time with him. I'm like, man, these kids do not know how good they got it. And he's like, dude, you were a lunatic when you coached me. So it's like a lot of kids when they come home and now they're adults, we talk, and a lot of it, they always make the joke like, man, you've changed, you're getting soft. And I remember when they first said that to me, I was like, damn, I don't know how.
Let's go.
They perceive me as soft, but I've come to reframe it as a very positive thing. What they're seeing now is my heart. They're not seeing my ego, right? They see now that I'm just not so heavy-handed, with the way that I coach. And I do try to connect more with kids and persuade them, where I did not feel the need to do that when I was younger. It's no, man, this is what I said. This is what you do, and that's how I was coached. And so, yeah, the changing thing, if you aren't okay with how you've changed, it can feel insulting. But like you said, man, if you guys meet me 5 years from now, and I'm not a little bit different, I've failed because one of my beliefs is Kaizen, constant and never-ending improvement. And that's a personal value of mine, and it's also one of our company values. So I hope I'm a different person every single year.
Absolutely. So Eric, as we get towards the end, is there anything else you want to hop in and hammer as we get to the end of this, bud? Because we could, I know I could go all day, and I don't want to keep him. So
we got a bunch we can hit on. I think the first point, just to put a bow on the parent thing, is as performance and strength coaches and trainers, I think one of the things that we also need to do is appreciate what that dynamic is that the kid deals with when they go home. Right. And so we can't expect the same thing. We're not training cyborgs. And so you may have one kid that's going home to marble floors and, parents that are very affluent and really don't maybe pay a whole lot of attention to the kid. And maybe you're going to another kid who's going home who's got a sick parent or has to take care of their younger siblings, or all these things have, some of the schools I work with, like these kids have to go and, coach, I missed the workout. I'm sorry, but I have to work. And it's not like they're working so they can go buy, something for themselves. They have to work because they have to, help put money back into the family. So understanding and appreciating what the dynamics of what these kids are dealing with allows us to coach them a little bit differently once you have some insight into that.
Yeah, I think that's a very wise statement. And again, I think it takes an evolved coach who's been doing this for a long time to recognize that. Because again, I think a lot of coaches, they fall into kind of the ego trap. It's about them. They'll say it's about impacting kids, but then if you look at the way they do the thing, it doesn't really align with that. So I think, as you evolve as a coach, you definitely start to realize that, these kids are dealing with all the same stuff you're dealing with. It's hard enough as a grown adult. And then if you remember how things were when you were a teenager or a preteen even, man, that's a lot to deal with. And a lot of kids don't have optimal environments at home. You mentioned kind of the disconnected parent. And I think that's just as bad as the heavy-handed, abusive parent. Kids just want to be seen, man. And if their parents aren't paying attention to them, they start finding ways to stand out. And that's not always the best.
Okay, so one last thing. We've talked a lot about your model, which is brilliant. And I want to dig into what you call your BCI wheel and talk about how that works.
Well, so the wheel was a way that I started to explain to parents the importance of including everything that an athlete needs. And I use this wheel as a way to explain it. And the circle in the middle, or the hub where all the spokes originated from, we talked about being your values. And there's 3 values we impress into every athlete, and that's discipline, dedication, and desire. And we've got specific definitions for them and what they look like in action. And that's what you have to anchor everything to. And each spoke on a wheel has to be evenly developed. Okay, now a really seasoned strength coach knows that to a degree this is not true, but it's important for parents to understand that they need to include things that they don't know they need to include. So we talk about strength, power, hypertrophy, flexibility, mobility. Like, I would argue flexibility is nowhere near as important as power, for example. Okay, but there's an opportunity to show a parent that this is an area that they could work, right? Mobility, stability, speed, agility, energy system conditioning, and then recovery and regeneration. That's what makes up our wheel. And I use this as a way to explain our program and how we touch on all these points. And then I really use it when we get to, I talk about SPP and GPP as one of the spokes as well. And it's the balance of these things. All the things on the wheel that I just talked about are really GPP for the sport. But one of the main things that we deal with in the private market is kids taking hitting lessons, pitching lessons, basketball skill lessons, 7-on-7 lessons. So I don't want to skip over that when we discuss this. So I talk about it, but I don't just talk about it being important. I give them a way to use it. And I talk about a general to specific continuum of efforts. At the end of your season, your main focus should be all the GPP stuff that we talked about: flexibility, mobility, speed, strength, power, hypertrophy, agility, energy system conditioning. That should be it. Okay. We need to build the body. And we tell parents what you should do is come to us 3 days a week. But if you're doing SPP style work, or what I call SPP style work in this context, like hitting and pitching lessons, that probably only needs to be 1 to 2 days a week. It does not need to be every day. But now, as we get closer to the end season, that relationship changes. You can cut back to 2 days a week with us, or maybe even 1 day a week, and ramp up the SPP work to 2 to 3, maybe even 4 days a week, depending on the sport. This has allowed us to explain to parents how to use our program year round, which is important for them to understand before you ask them to make a commitment like that. It's also allowed us to have really good relationships with hitting and pitching companies. In fact, this new location that I'm buying, I'm probably going to acquire a hitting and pitching business that's inside of this building that I want to buy. And it's because I have a good relationship and a rapport with these people. And they knew I was looking to expand. And because I've never, shit on them, for a lack of better words, like, oh, don't go do that. You need to work on your body first. It's really helped us. So that wheel has been a great way for us to explain what we believe in and how to use our program well. And then also talk about the other competing interests that athletes need to participate in, but should not be prioritized year round. There's a heavy bias towards skill acquisition in youth sports. And if you don't address that, you're leaving them up to their foundation of knowledge and understanding around those things. And that's probably going to work against you from a continuity standpoint.
Love it. Love it. And ironically, Andy, I do something really similar, just with a different shape. I actually took Gray Cook's performance pyramid and I blew it out. And so mine has multiple tiers to it, where it's the foundation is health. Like, if you're not healthy, then it doesn't matter like how fast you run or how high you jump. If you're in the training room, nobody ever scored a basket or, hit a home run from there. So health, and then movement. Do you move well enough? And then from there, all the performance stuff, the strength, the speed, the power. And then from there, you have recovery, and then you have the mental, and then you have skill on top. And I say, that's what I don't do. And that's for your coaches to do, and that's for them to get you there. But everything underneath that allows you to express that skill. And if we're missing something, if something's missing, it's usually a missing box within these 59 subcomponents I have in there. And it gives them a holistic view to say, this is not just about one thing. Because if I just pick one box and pick strength, well, what about the other 58? If I disregard those, then I'm not doing my job. And so we have to get you to understand and appreciate that this is not show up, listen to what Coach Andy says, and then I'm going to go home and not think about it. This is a round the clock process that you have to be invested in. And I'm going to be the architect of this. I'm going to be the general contractor of this, but ultimately you're putting up the walls, you're doing all the work. And I just need you to follow the plans. But I need you to understand why we're doing the plans instead of just following what I say.
Yeah, and I think what you just explained there too is a good way for your clients and anybody listening, for parents to understand that in high school, those coaches have very hard decisions to make, right? So most kids are lifting at school. They're going to prioritize the big lifting. And there's a lot of things on that pyramid they're not going to touch. Maybe even not because they don't know they need to or that they don't want to. It's just logistical constraints and time constraints make it hard to fit that in. And that's one of the things that we've talked about a lot is I don't want my program to be the main focus. We're essentially the supplement to what these kids do at school if they're already doing something at school, and we fill gaps. And because we do that, we also get the support of all the local strength coaches. They don't keep kids out of our program because they know we're not trying to override what they do or step on their toes.
That's great. It's exactly the same thing that we do. We give supplementary programs if your coach is not giving one, and just fill in the gaps and it's not the coach's fault. The coaches, I run high school programs. I'm writing it for 60 high school kids that are going to be a different 60 next year. So I can't worry about that Bill doesn't have enough ankle mobility or that Susie doesn't have enough elasticity. Like, that's what you come to me for, to fill in those gaps. And they're going to give you your good bread and butter. And so that's awesome. So talk to us. You talked about a new spot that you're opening. Is that the big new thing on the horizon for you?
Yeah, that's the big new thing right now. I just had a building appraised last Tuesday. I should get that appraisal back. It's an 11,000 square foot building. It's in a city near us that's the second fastest growing in the state of Alabama. There is a well-known hitting and pitching business inside of it, as well as some high-level travel ball baseball teams that I could acquire as well as a part of this deal. It'd be like an all-asset acquisition. And listen, if the math works out, which right now I'm very optimistic, we'll try to open another location in July. We've got kind of all the preliminary work done. Like, we know how we're going to launch it. We know how we'll frame up the gym. We've got the equipment list. We've already got the systems. So it's really just plug and play at this point. But getting into the right deal is really important. Expansion for the sake of expansion sinks a lot of ships. And we're a really solid business. Like I said, I'm pretty much operationally irrelevant from this one, which was really important before we opened another one. That way, if I'm needed to be more active in this new one, I can be available, but also just to have enough space from the day-to-day operations to see things clear. And part of my goal from the beginning was to, take one cash flowing business and put it inside another to pay off that asset, right? So this is a cash flow business. It can help me pay off a piece of real estate that I can leave to my kids. And that's the purpose of this is, to leave something for my family.
It's spectacular, and best of luck with all that, and you'll be able to do it because of the freedom that systems allow that you've built, and it's not just about you; it's about what you've built, and it's awesome stuff. Mr. Perry, I told you it was going to be a good one.
This is a good one, man. I could do this all day. Yeah, man, that was a lot of fun. Thank you for the conversation today. That was a blast, and we appreciate you having you on, and look forward to hopefully doing this again sometime. Eric, I'm going to have you close us out today, bud.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, Andy. It was great. And want to thank you for listening. And this has been the Principles of Performance podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.